Okay, it's time for part 3 of the deep dive into the Tesla Q3 investor call. We're going to get into it. Reminder, if you support me on the Locals platform or on Patreon or as a YouTube channel member at the exclusive content level, you get early access to most of my videos. YouTube channel members at the basic level get early access to some of my videos. But let's get into Q3 deep dive part 3. Are you ready? Let's go.
Can you talk about how Tesla could adjust if we were to enter a prolonged recession, including new product prioritization, investment flexibility, new factory versus factory expansion, service support infrastructure, productivity cost measures, and demand stimulation alternatives?
We keep getting questions about demand that relate to different ways, and I think you're going to see that Elon and the team knocked this one out of the park. They're set. So check this out.
To be frank, we're going pedal to the metal, come rain or shine. So we are not reducing our production in any meaningful way, recession or not recession.
It's the 1% point you made.
Yeah, exactly. So everyone, I think the public at large realizes that the world's moving towards electric vehicles, and that it's foolish to actually buy a new gasoline car at this point, because the residual value of that gasoline car is going to be very low. So I think we're having to be in a very good spot. That I wouldn't say it's recession-proof, but it's certainly recession resilient, because basically the people of Earth have, in large part, made the decision to move away from gasoline cars to electric cars. And then in transitioning electricity generation to sustainable, you need solar and wind with a stationary battery pack to buffer the power. So you have 24/7 power, because the wind doesn't blow all the time and the sun doesn't shine all the time. So that also is, we actually see the energy storage business, stationary storage, growing more like, I don't know, 150 to 200% a year. So faster than cars.
That was a big number. We see the energy storage business, or the energy storage business, growing 150 to 200% a year. They see the car business growing 50% a year. They see the energy storage business growing 150 to 200% a year. That's like, if you do 10 gigawatt hours this year, you're expecting to do 20 to 30, 25 to 30 gigawatt hours next year. If you do 10 gigawatt hours this year, you're expecting to do 25 to 30 gigawatt hours the next year. And then the next year, you're going to do, it's just growing. That's a massive exponential growth. But to achieve that 1,000 gigawatt hours, you're going to need, in the United States, in North America, to achieve that 1,000 gigawatt hours, you're going to need a lot of energy storage, because the cars won't use that many batteries. Globally, the vision is that there's going to be so much solar, there's going to be so much wind, you're going to need so much energy storage that they've got to produce a huge volume of these battery storage devices, primarily with iron cells. So there's going to be a lot of iron-based cells that needs to be produced to fulfill that. But that is a big 150 to 200% a year. That is really, really rapid growth. So you've got Lathrop Megapack factories going to be 40 gigawatt hours. They're going to have to produce like multiple gigafactories. The mega factory that produces the Lathrop Megapack, they're going to have multiple factories like that, probably around the United States, probably around the world. We're going to see that grow really fast.
Yeah, sorry, just to add, before you jump in, Martin, I mean, just to echo Elon's point, I mean, I think, where our cash balance is, what our forecasted cash generation is, where our margins are as a company, I mean, we can withstand quite a lot of downside before we would have to dig into our capital plans, supercharger expansion, product lineup. So, the business has done quite well over the last handful of quarters. And this is a real opportunity, I think, for the company to press forward in the most aggressive way, as Elon is mentioning.
Yeah, we try to model out, like, let's say 2023 is a brutal recession year. Even then, we generate meaningful cash. And once you get out of that, 2024 plus, it's insane.
Okay, so there's two things there. One is Tesla has a goal. The goal is to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy and transportation. And so Tesla is going pedal to the metal, balls to the wall, whatever you want to say, to produce as many electric vehicles, to produce as many energy storage units, to produce as many solar panels, to produce as many cars, to get as much as they can done to transition the world to sustainable energy. There is a global fleet of 2 billion vehicles, and Tesla has produced less than 1% of that volume. We need to convert the world from 2 billion gasoline vehicles to the equivalent, at least 2 billion electric vehicles, or maybe it's 500 million electric vehicles, some of which serve as robotaxis, but we need to make that transition. And Tesla making 2 million vehicles or 5 million vehicles is only beginning to make a dent. So if your goal is to transition the world to sustainable energy and transportation, you don't slow down because of recession. You keep going. And I think Zach's position is, hey, this is a time for us to accelerate. This is a time for us to grab market share. This is the time for us to make our dent. If everybody else is slowing down, we speed up. They're generating cash. The other side is they're generating so much cash that they can afford to invest. They can afford the growth. They go forward. And if everybody else holds back and Tesla accelerates, then Tesla has much more market share going forward when the economy gets better.
The progression from Tesla's first platform with S and X to the second platform with 3 and Y led to 50% reduction in cost of goods sold. What do you see Tesla's third platform being released, and what level of cost of goods sold reduction could you achieve?
I didn't think they were going to answer this question, but they did, and this is fantastic. So let's have some fun with this one.
Well, we don't want to talk exact dates, but this is the primary focus of our new vehicle development team, obviously. But yeah, we're at this point, we've done the engineering for Cybertruck and for Semi. So obviously, you can guess what we're working on, which is the next generation vehicle, which will be probably about half the cost of the 3Y platform. It'll be smaller, to be clear.
That's a lot. Half the cost of the 3Y platform. If you figure it costs Tesla less than $40,000 to make a 3 or a Y, then this vehicle is going to cost less than about $20,000 or less for Tesla to manufacture. That's the target. And it's going to be smaller than a 3Y. So now we know it's going to be smaller than a Tesla Model 3. We don't know more than that. We didn't get, is it a compact? Is it a sedan? Is it a minivan? We didn't get any of that, but smaller than a Model 3, half the cost to manufacture. And there's more gold coming.
It will, I think, swiftly exceed the production of all our other vehicles combined.
Okay, so two things there. It will exceed the production of all our other vehicles combined. So they're probably heading to 5 million vehicles a year on all the other vehicles between Cybertruck and Model Y is 1.5 million or more, maybe 2 million. Model 3 might get to 1 million. That's 2.5 million. Cybertruck probably gets to 500,000 or more. I think you get to 3 million at least. Then you have S and X, which are smaller, and Semi is just smaller. So I think you get to 3 million vehicles at least with the vehicles that we know about. So now this new vehicle is going to exceed all those vehicles. So this new vehicle is going to be at least 3 million vehicles, and swiftly they're going to ramp production of this new vehicle swiftly. So, and they have previously said this vehicle would start production in 2024. He said he didn't want to talk about dates, but previously said this vehicle would start production in 2024. So 2025, we can expect this vehicle will be produced in volumes greater than 3 million vehicles a year. That's good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we're going to take everything we learned from SX, 3Y, Cybertruck, and Semi and pour it into that platform. But we, as you've said to us many times, we're on a 2-for-1 target. So
that's that. We're on a 2-for-1 target.
Yeah, that implies that trying to get to that 50% number again.
That's exactly. It's like what would it take to. That's exactly what Lars describes is what we're trying to figure is how do we make 2 cars for the amount of effort that it currently takes us to make one Model 3?
How do we make 2 cars from the same effort it takes to make one Model 3? That's 2-for-1.
Yeah, effort, costs,
Yeah.
perform,
Both things
efficiency,
considered.
yeah, all those things. Half the loss, half the cost, or factory floor space.
If I heard him right, half the loss, half the cost, half the factory floor space.
For twice the output.
And we do believe this can be done.
Yeah.
By the way, I should mention that when I said that probably that I see a path, again, extreme, very difficult path, incredible execution required, massive amount of hard work and some luck to get to where Tesla is worth as much as Apple and Saudi Aramco combined. I wasn't including Optimus.
Okay, so before we get into Optimus, if I heard them right, I think what they're saying is with half the factory floor space, with half that they hope to make twice as many vehicles. I think that's what they're saying. I don't know if they're saying half the factory floor space to make the same number of vehicles or half the factory floor space to make twice the number of vehicles. I think they may be heading towards a smaller footprint factory for the next generation vehicle. And if the smaller generation footprint works and the cost structure works and everything, it may make it easier to put robotaxi factories in different locations. That's not something they talked about. I wonder if that's a potential idea there that when they build a robotaxi factory, and especially if it's going to be a smaller vehicle. I have talked before about Giga Japan, Giga Osaka. The Japanese market, supposedly, they don't like larger cars. If it's going to be smaller than a Model 3, it's going to fit better on Japanese roads. So that's another argument for Giga Osaka. If you're going to build gigafactories somewhere else, Japan's the fourth largest or third or fourth largest car market in the world, wealthy country, good place for that. And then, of course, Elon's saying they're going to exceed Apple and Saudi Aramco in total valuation of $4 trillion plus valuation, not concluding the value generated by Optimus. Now, I just want to say here, I think Elon is massively sandbagging the value of Robotaxi. Unless he's modeling Robotaxi value somehow differently than I am, the value that Robotaxi generates is off the charts. That's like not a $5 trillion company. That's a $10 to $20 trillion company, if not more. So to say we're only going to get to 4 or 5 trillion in valuation with Robotaxi without Optimus, he's talked in the past about having a 10 million vehicle Robotaxi fleet, and if it's making $60,000 a year gross profit per car, that's $600 billion a year in gross profit, and that's why you get to such insane valuations. That's how I come up with such insane valuations. So, and I don't think 10 million is the limit. I think over time you expand the volume of robotaxis and the profit per vehicle comes down, but you could get to a world of 100 million robotaxis making $20,000 or $25,000 a year in profit, and you just get to ridiculous numbers. The profit story there is just absolutely nuts. That's like a $2.5 trillion a year gross profit, and you can see where that goes. So your valuation there is 20 trillion or 30 trillion or more, and then you add bot. So I'm not sure why Elon is constraining the value of the company. Does he see Robotaxi turning out differently? It seems obvious to me that Robotaxi is headed that direction, and if everybody else pulls back and Tesla goes forward, Tesla grabs more market share. If Tesla gets there first with FSD, they're going to nail this. That's how I see it.
Let's go to analyst questions next. The first question comes from Adam Jonas from Morgan Stanley.
So Elon, would you consider vertically integrating into mining? That's my first question.
We'll do whatever we have to. Whatever the limiting factor is, we'll do. We do not artificially constrain ourselves. But we don't vertically integrate just for the hell of vertically integrating. Like if there's a great supplier who's better than us, or we think at least very good, or even where the economics of comparative advantage suggests that we should use that supplier, even if we could beat them, but we could use our resources to do something else that would be more productive, then we won't insource in that case. But if we have to go mine, we will mine.
So that's not really a surprise there. There's no hint that Tesla's about to acquire a mining company. There had been some talk about whether they would do that. They have this big cash pile. Maybe it would make sense for Tesla to acquire a mining company if they thought that would help. Maybe it would just make sense. I mean, at Battery Day, they did indicate they were going to start effectively mining lithium from clays in Nevada, and they're apparently not doing that, or he would have said something maybe about that. Kind of leaves open the question: what happened to the lithium mining, the lithium clays in Nevada? Are you guys still doing something there? But not really a big surprise. We'll do it if we have to.
My follow-up is, 1 terawatt hour of manufacturing in the United States, vertically integrated. What would need to change with U.S. permitting laws to allow that? Kind of what would be your message to this administration or next? And do you think you could do a terawatt hour? What's the going price of that? Can you do that for under $100 billion in the States?
Well, I think that the message to the government would be that there should be, I should say, we've actually had conversations with a number of the senior government leaders, White House, Congress, and whatnot, and And the suggestion that we have is that there should be an expedited permitting process for anything which is critical to a sustainable energy future. So it doesn't make sense to put like a coal mine and a sustainable energy battery like lithium mine in the same category. Coal does not have a future, lithium does. And by the way, you can extract lithium with almost no disturbance to the local environment.
So that was an interesting reference there about extracting lithium with no disturbance. That sounds like what he was talking about with lithium clays at Battery Day. I don't know if lithium in general is extracted with no disturbance to the environment. What I've seen of lithium brine facilities in, say, Chile and South America is they're taking these huge areas of water and there is an impact. So does that suggest he has another method of extracting lithium we don't know about? I don't know.
It's not like some ugly, nasty mine situation. So I would recommend expedited permitting would really be helpful. Fast track things that are important for the environment and humanity's future on Earth. That seems logical. Okay. And the reception has been positive, so we'll see if something happens with that. Probably on this earnings call, we're not ready to go into financial details of what it would take to get there, but what we are seeing is radical improvements as we redesign the whole supply chain and all of the elements that go into battery cell. We're figuring out dramatic efficiencies that I think will the net result of which would be that the capital required to achieve that level of output will be much less than what people think.
Oh, there was this question about how much is it going to cost in terms of capital investment to be able to produce 1,000 gigawatt hours of battery cells in the United States, and Elon is saying the way we're looking at it, we're going to be able to get substantial savings on the capital investment required. And in this place, he mentioned the supply chain. If you check out Drew Baglino's talk at Stanford, there was this moment where he was talking about that the current supply chain for batteries is sort of like not purposely designed for batteries. It's sort of like, hey, we've got this other industry here and it has this byproduct, and hey, we can use that for batteries, as opposed to a purposely built supply chain for battery cells. And I think that's part of where Master Plan 3 is heading. That's part of where Tesla is heading, is developing a supply chain that's purpose built for battery cells, purpose built for electric vehicles, as opposed to a supply chain that really existed for other industries and has been converted to that they think they can, in scaling that, they can get significant cost savings.
Well, let's go to the next question from Colin Langan from Wells Fargo.
Any update on full self-driving? I think you had said a couple quarters ago it would be available by the end of the year. Is that still possible? Would it still be like a level 4 or level 5 that you're talking about? And are there any sort of regulatory hurdles you'd have to think about?
As I said earlier, we're expecting to release the full self-driving software to anyone who orders the package by the end of this year. It's a separate matter as to will it have regulatory approval. It won't have regulatory approval at that time, but the car will be able to take you from your home to your work, your friend's house, to the grocery store, without you touching the wheel.
So that's a pretty big statement from Elon. And let's be clear, I drive FSD beta on basically a daily basis. And I would say when you're in normal conditions, when there's nothing unusual on the roadways, you have a regular, straightforward situation, it's pretty much you can go from driveway to driveway without having, you have to touch the wheel because the car insists that you touch the wheel to let it know that you're paying attention. So I don't, when he said you don't have to touch the wheel, is he saying they're going to take the nag away? I doubt that. I don't think the nag is going to be gone by the end of this year. And I would love the nag to go away because I get annoyed by having to touch the steering wheel. But with that said, if the mission is to get somebody from point A to point B safely in most circumstances, yeah, it's already safer than it needs to be. It's already as safe as it needs to be, if not safer. It's not delightful. Like, it will slow down when it doesn't need to slow down. It will, in my case, it will refuse to make a right on red where it should make a right on red. There's a lot of little things where it could be better. And as a human, you might end up taking over to change that behavior. But by and large, most driving, it's pretty good. And the other challenge is where I'm living right now is a construction zone. It is not handling the construction zone well. So you need to take over in construction zones. In my experience, not every construction zone, but in some construction zones, you need to take over. So there's a lot of places where it's not going to work. So it's not level 5. That I don't think Elon addressed the level 4, level 5 at that point. Maybe he addresses it later. Level 4 being the car can drive by itself in most places without human intervention. Level 5 being the car can drive anywhere without human intervention. Frankly, I think most humans are not level 5. Teenagers can't drive in Manhattan, just as an example, or Boston. There's a lot of young drivers who can't drive in big cities. I know a lot of people who are afraid to drive on interstate highways. Not a lot of people. I know some people who are afraid to drive on interstate highways. So what does level 5 really mean? But that's a pretty bold statement from Elon. I think really, what's going to happen, because it's October. It's near the end of October, and I'm not seeing the car is that good that by the end of the year it's gonna be that amazing. We do have a new version coming out, 10.69.3, that may be a big improvement, but there's still a ways to go in a lot of areas. But safely getting you from point A to point B in normal circumstances, yeah, I think it's already there. I think it's already there, and some additional improvement would be nice. But like making the unprotected left turn, the Chuck Cook style unprotected left turn. I'm still seeing problems with the car making left turns in places where there's a median. What do you call it? A suicide lane, some people would call it. Either coming out and using that median lane or making the left turn from that lane, or other vehicles are entering to use that lane. I still think the vehicle has a lot of issues with that. And I think it's going to be a few more iterations of the software before we get there. But, maybe 10.69.3 is better than I realize. We'll see what happens.
It would mean like level 4, level 5 kind of traditional definition you're talking about.
Well, there's a debate as like what are the interventions per mile, and all those, maybe the safety interventions per mile. Like we don't think that's quite ready to have no one behind the wheel. It's just that you will almost never have to touch the vehicle controls. So like when I came to Giga Texas today from a friend's house, I never touched any of the controls all the way in here. And then there is a longer process of like what's called the March of Nines, of like how many nines reliability do you need before you could really be comfortable saying that the car could drive with no one in it. Some subjectivity as to how many nines you need. Well, I think we'll be pretty close to having enough nines that you can have no one in the car by the end of this year, and certainly without question whatsoever in my mind next year.
There's a lot there. First of all, he acknowledged, no, you can't. We have to have somebody in the driver's seat. And I love the reference to safety interventions per mile. Because there's interventions like it won't make the right turn on red. That's an intervention. It's not a safety intervention. It might be a safety intervention if the guy behind you is a road rager and he's pissed off that you're not going. But it's not technically a safety intervention. Is it's going to crash if I don't intervene, right? And really, those are very rare in my experience. It's just that sometimes it won't go if you don't intervene. So that's a little tricky. But he's getting really serious when he's saying, be able to drive with no one in the car. And I thought he said by the end of this year, which is really bold. That's like possible by the end of this year, but very, very confident by the end of next year, by sometime next year, they'll be able to drive with no one in the car. And I think that's bold. I do think there's promise for it. It's one of the things where it's really hard for us to see the rate of improvement, to see I think Tesla has an internal list of things they need to fix. And they know how much progress they're making on that list. And they can see, okay, we should have this done by next quarter. We should have this done by middle of next year. We should have this done by the end of next year. Things like I'm describing the challenge with a suicide lane, or getting the unprotected left turn to be fully there, dealing with construction zones. They probably have a list of things. These are things we're going to get to. And then as Dojo comes online, and as the NVIDIA cluster, AI training supercomputer cluster improves, as those improve, as they make other software improvements, as they add more data because there's so many more vehicles driving, it may be that they're just looking at it saying, hey, we're on pace to get all these problems solved. And I think, as opposed to the past, I think they have a much better idea of what problems need to be solved. That's probably the biggest difference. So when Elon made predictions in the past, they have so much data now. They have so much information on interventions that occur, on problems that occur, that I think they have a much better idea of what they need to get done. And it's a pretty bold thing, but if they get, driving empty by the end of next year, that's Robotaxi. And that's when you start talking about value of the company, that's when valuation takes off. Because the minute they open a Robotaxi network, valuation goes to the sky. And the idea that it's only going to be a $4 trillion company when it becomes the dominant Robotaxi platform in the world, it's going to be crazy. That's one of the funniest things is when he says 4 trillion, I'm like, are you kidding? The valuation of a Robotaxi of the Robotaxi company is off the charts. If you're going to have 10 million Robotaxis making $60,000 a year in profit, it's to the moon, baby. It's insane. The valuation is just off the charts. And that projection would suggest that he thinks the Robotaxi network will be live by the end of 2023 or in 2024. And that's nuts. And I think he's right. Y'all know I tend to be over optimistic, but I think that they have some internal stuff they're looking at. Like I said, they've got that list of stuff we need to fix before we're there, and I think they know. And then you have the Robotaxi vehicle being produced in 2024, and that vehicle is going to be the ideal vehicle for that network. So that's probably the most promising thing in the call. I just think when Elon makes that prediction now, he's got a lot more behind it than he had before.
And I think we'll also have enough data next year to be able to show to regulators that the car is safer, much safer than the average human.
And there's that thing about the safety data. And he mentioned they have 60 million miles and it's increasing exponentially. I'm not sure exponentially is the right word, but Elon knows this stuff better than I do. But you're generating a high volume of data. And as you add more vehicles to the fleet, as they use FSD beta more, as you generate more data, you're going to get, I think you need a lot of miles to be able to demonstrate that. But, even if you only have a couple 100 million miles and you're able to show, hey, our crash rate's way lower than human rates. I don't know how many miles you need. You may not need that many miles to show that. So I think they may be on pace to get there really fast. And, once you demonstrate to regulators, look, our crash rate is 1/10 of the average human, it's really hard for regulators to say no. And then you also have, we have Robotaxi fleets operating in places in Chandler, Arizona, in San Francisco, to be able to go to those places and operate a Robotaxi fleet, they already have them. So that should be really straightforward. If Waymo's operating a fleet there, if Cruise is operating a fleet there, why would you stop Tesla from operating a fleet there if Tesla is able to demonstrate, hey, we're able to do this? I think that's really promising. That we may see Tesla Robotaxis operating in Chandler, Arizona, or in San Francisco, or anywhere else that has a test Robotaxi fleet operating from somebody else. Why wouldn't they let Tesla operate a similar fleet? That seems like a no-brainer that's coming.
And just as a follow-up, you mentioned in the prior questions about IRA. I mean, it sounded like you thought you could can you get all of it? I mean, because my interpretation is the production credits, battery component credits for buyers seems very likely for you guys. Is the sourcing part of it possible? Because that seems like a pretty tough hurdle given how much has to be sourced from the U.S.
So we have a cross-functional team that's looking very closely at it. As you mentioned, the sourcing threshold increases by the year. So we're looking at all options and also getting some clarification from Treasury. It's important to say that's only a fraction of the other credits. We do manufacture ourselves in the U.S. We manufacture the modules in the U.S. So that's pretty free and clear. So yes, we feel confident that we'll have a path as these incentives, as the threshold sort of increases by the year.
Yeah, we'll meet those thresholds.
What's going on there is in the inflation, what I call the Inflation Acceleration Act, but what they call the Inflation Reduction Act, there are specific requirements the further out you go, how much of materials have to be sourced from certain source countries. Basically can't be China, believe it or not. There's specific countries that are acceptable and it's a fairly small list. But Tesla is building their own supply chain and they can locate their supply chain in places that fit. And that makes it, and as I think it was Lars pointed out, most of the credits are not dependent on that. And most of the credits are stuff where they're already going to qualify. So there's a small subset of those credits where they have to worry about that, but they can make that happen anyway.
The next question comes from Colin Rush from Oppenheimer.
The operating leverage has been pretty impressive here, and I'm curious about areas where you could, invest in an incremental way, whether it's on the R&D side or on the sales side, to accelerate growth or cost reduction, or should we be thinking about this level of spend on a go-forward basis, and some significant operating leverage as you scale up from here?
Yeah, I mean, our operating leverage has improved quite a bit. It's the lowest this quarter, I think, ever, and by a decent amount. Our OpEx as a percentage of revenue. I mean, our forecast is that it will keep reducing. I mean, I think the way to think about it is, our total amount of operating expenses will slowly tick up as the company grows. It's very hard to keep it flat with the rapid growth of the company, but it's growing much slower. So some amount of growth there, but the top line of the business is growing so quickly. And I think there continues to be enormous opportunity to improve the overhead efficiency of the business, and we're seeing it.
Yeah.
So that gets into that bean counter scenario where you don't feel like you're talking about engineering, but it's really business engineering. Is, can we scale the growth of the company while keeping certain expenses growing slower? And that increases profits, right? You have there's expenses that aren't like getting the material for the car, but like operating certain aspects of the business that don't need to grow as fast as the rest of the business. And if you can grow the business, the overall revenue fast, and you can identify certain parts of the company that, costs go up, but the costs grow slower, then overall your profits grow faster. And that's as I understand it, that's what they're talking about. And I do expect to make a video maybe next week. I found a great article talking specifically about operating leverage, just independently of this call. I just saw this great article about it. I'm probably going to make a video breaking down that story, the story of Tesla's operating leverage. Pretty interesting. From a bean counter nerdy perspective, but also from a business engineering perspective. Pretty interesting stuff.
We're in at least for now, quite like good position of we're investing in everything we can think of to possibly invest in. We're still generating cash. Because it's a pretty good place to be.
Yeah, I mean, how many R&D programs are we running in parallel right now?
A lot.
People don't even know all the R&D stuff we're doing. They know some of it, but a bunch of it they don't.
I also don't think cash is a good gauge of how much R&D you're.
No, it isn't. Because it's like this. Like it's not like it's not like engineers are they're not generic. So it's just like, if you spend, 5 billion or 10 billion, that will that your actual R&D or in terms of useful product ship will be proportionate to that. It's just not true. Engineers aren't coming off some assembly line like cookies or something.
Until we get Optimus coming.
Yeah, Optimus will change things. What matters is, where are the most brilliant people working? And Tesla remains Tesla and SpaceX are the two companies where the smartest engineers want to work.
The point there, this relates to the stock buyback. My attitude is they shouldn't do a stock buyback because they should be deploying capital to grow the company. And it sounds like they're so efficient in their R&D. They've got so much R&D going on that they simply can't. And there's a shortage of engineering. There's a shortage of engineering talent, or at least good engineers, that they simply can't deploy the capital fast enough. They're generating more cash than they can deploy productively in R&D. And that's why they're able to do a share buyback, because the cash pile is just growing so fast. It's like, we're spending it as efficiently and as fast as we can to invest in these R&D projects to try to grow the company, and we just can't do anymore because they don't have the engineering talent. Now, I would like to hear, hey, we're going to build more factories and we're going to put that capital into factories. But I think my impression is that that's how fast they're generating cash, that even when it comes to building factories, they just can't, they don't have the engineering teams available to be able to build enough factories fast enough to spend the cash that they're generating so much cash that they have no other choice but to give it back to shareholders in a share buyback.
I mean, like, we don't have to spend billions of dollars to invest in the future and invent the future. Engineers are also cost conscious, and we don't necessarily just burn money out the window when we're trying to do R&D. So I would stop looking at like R&D as a cash investment for how much we're doing.
Like one Nikola Tesla is frankly worth an infinite number of dollars of engineers. Well, you could have like almost an infinite number of good engineers, and they would not be able to do what one Nikola Tesla could do.
Yeah, and the other point mentioned there was they have R&D programs we don't even know about, right? There was a mention earlier that they've got a lot of R&D going on. Some of the R&D is stuff we do know about, like R&D they're doing in battery tech, the R&D they're doing with bot, the R&D they're doing with self-driving. there's other art. I mean, that like, what have they got in the skunk works? What are they working on we don't know about? I mean, we know they're working on vehicle engineering, that's R&D, but do they have some other stuff we don't know about? What else are they doing R&D? I mean, there's a big question. What are they doing R&D on that we don't know about? And how much value might that generate? We know they're doing R&D on AI training supercomputers and AI. Like, what else do they have? Because they've told us a lot. So there's something else going on they're doing R&D on we don't know about? Crazy stuff. Okay, that was part 3. And we're going to move now. If you're watching this as the YouTube premiere when it first aired and there's a live chat going, we're going to move now to my regular live stream, my regular Sunday live stream, 1 o'clock Eastern. That's going to start shortly. So please check that out. Otherwise, please check out my other videos. Please support this channel on the Locals platform, on Patreon as a YouTube channel member. Check out the t-shirts at elonbits.com. Like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Like and share this video, subscribe to the channel. And thank you so much for watching.